Hey gang, my name's Eric Sorensen. I'm pastor and church planner of Epiphany Church here in New York City, and also associate pastor of Hillside Church in Succassana, New Jersey. And I am here today standing outside of a courthouse in Manhattan. And that's really fitting because, well, I'm going to be talking to you all about why God established government. That's really Paul's subject in Romans 13, the chapter that was assigned to me. So why is it, in a nutshell, that government is there, and how should we respond to it? Well, first of all, Paul makes it very clear in the beginning that government is there ultimately to be a servant for good. Its purpose is to curb evil in society, is to make sure that when you walk down the street, you're not constantly worried that you're going to be robbed or murdered or that somebody is going to attack you all the time. And that if that kind of thing does happen, which of course it does in our society, that there will be repercussions so that the person who does that sort of thing knows that they can't get away with it. Now, in the early church, there was a question about, how is it that Christians should respond to governing authorities, especially since most of the government, almost all of the government at the beginning were not Christians. Did that mean that Christians didn't have to obey? Ultimately, of course, Paul says we're citizens of heaven after all. So what does it mean to be a citizen of heaven? Does that mean we're not citizens of the places we live? Paul says no. As a matter of fact, Christians should strive to be the ones that follow the law, to be the ones that seek to obey, so that we don't cause any trouble to our neighbor or cause any trouble to those who govern us. We should seek to live peaceably with all, Paul says. And so the government exists really to avenge wrongdoing and to serve good. That's what it's supposed to do. Does it always do that? Well, no. The news tells us that, and there's plenty of times where that isn't the case. But generally speaking, that's why God has established it. Now let's move on a little bit to why it is God has called us to obey the governing authorities. Paul says basically two reasons. One, he says if we don't, well, then we have reason to fear. And that's true. There's nothing like committing a wrongdoing and then having to look over your shoulder all the time to make sure that no one's going to catch you. You do live in fear if you've broken the law. Even in a minute way. You can relate to this if you've ever been in a car that's speeding and then suddenly they see a police officer on the side of the road. Well, guess what? They slow down real quick. It doesn't fool the police officer, but they're hoping not to get the consequence of their law breaking, which was surpassing the speed limit. And so Paul says, we should fear the repercussions of what will happen to us if we break the law. But then there's a second reason, and it's the most important reason that he wraps up the passage with, and that is that we should seek to obey out of love for our neighbor. And this really gets to the heart of the Christian's worldview, the Christian's ethic, that ultimately we're not following the law because we're afraid. We're ultimately following the law because we want to do good for our neighbor, and we want to love our neighbor, and that's one way we can do it, by respecting their boundaries, by respecting the laws that are in place. So we'll talk a little bit afterwards about some of the implications for this personally, for you and your life, but that'll at least get you started on your way through Romans 13.